Welcome to Comadres y Comics.
Comadres y Comics is a podcast hosted by 3 Latina women.
We highlight the Latinx presence in the comic book industry as creators, characters, and fans.
Join us as we talk chisme, comics, fandom, and beer. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Las Platicas. Kristen, who is here in Las Platicas today?
Yes, so if you didn't already know, Las Platicas is a show hosted by Comadres y Comics, where we meet with creators and friends to talk about upcoming projects, events, and all-around awesome news in the comic industry. Today, in honor of Black History Month, we have the pleasure of having Marcus A. Bedford Jr. with us, and we are so excited. He works with Big Smiles Foundation, a nonprofit organization that facilitates individuals' access to sober living housing, recovery programming, probation adherence, and job training. He also is the creator of Calicarceration Comic. That's a tongue twister that I always have trouble saying, which was published in the California Lifers newsletter from 2009 to 2013. He uses comics to share personal narratives and insights from his own journey through the justice system. Most recently, he was a panelist on the Comadres y Comics panel in San Diego Comic-Con International 2024 called Confronting Recidivism with Comics. We are very excited to have you with us, Marcus, and we welcome you to Las Platicas. Thank you so much for being here. Yay!
Thank you.
So, we love to have our guests share their origin story, quote unquote. You know, all heroes have origin stories of how they started their comics journey. So can you tell us a little bit about how, if you have any history with reading comics and, you know, how you got into comics and how that maybe led you into deciding to create your own comic?
Oh, okay. So, well, I started getting into comics when I was incarcerated, actually. So I really wasn't a comic book person growing up, but along my journey being incarcerated, I came across a couple fellas that were into comics. And so they would be like, hey, here, look at this comic book. And at the time, I didn't even know that they had Black characters.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Only characters I knew growing up was Spider-Man, Hulk, and Superman, and Aquaman. So I didn't have an idea that there were Black characters. And so when they shared that with me, it kind of opened my eyes to comics.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so that's what opened my eyes to like, okay, there's comic characters that look like me, you know? And so that kind of like sparked it in me, you know, to now when I was looking at comic strips, I would look at them in a different light, right? And so, and then we started to actually put together our own comic book.
Oh, really cool.
But because, and so we all got to make our own character. And that was the first time I ever created a character that had not necessarily superhero powers, but being himself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then you fast forward maybe, and that was like 1998, 99. So we fast forward to 2009, being incarcerated. We were on a lockdown. And we was on the start of a lockdown. So I don't know if you're familiar with lockdowns, but when you're on lockdown, you're in a cell 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. You get a shower every 72 hours. So on the start of this particular lockdown, I come across a comic strip. Now, it was in a newsletter. So the newsletter was the California Lifers newsletter. Great art, great writing, very informative. And the producer of that newspaper or that newsletter was himself incarcerated, who got himself out. So I thought that was in my mind. I was like, wow, this dude's a superhero, right? But there was a comic strip in there that was written by a guy that never been to prison before, and it was kind of making a joke about prison. Well, I kind of took offense to that. Kind of upset me a little bit. So what I did was I had this bright idea. Now, I've never drawn a comic before in my life. Had never even thought about drawing a comic strip other than when we were just talking, making characters. But me as an artist, that wasn't the farthest thing on my mind, to be an artist. So during that lockdown, I grabbed a comic strip. And I said, I'm going to teach myself how to draw. So what I would do is each Sunday when the newspaper would come, I would grab now take in mind, we're still on the lockdown. So whenever the newspaper would come in, I would ask for the comic strip. And so I would just trace them. I would find one that I liked, and I would just trace it for hours. I got nowhere to go, right? I got nothing but time, right? So I started tracing them, right? And I got a little better to the point where now I would look at it and follow and draw it just from what I see. And from that point, I said, okay, let me make my own comics. I want to try to make my own comic strip. And that is how it began.
So your comic strip actually ended up being in that newsletter that you originally saw, that comic that just didn't hit right with you. So how did you get your comic into that newsletter?
Okay, so even getting it there, I didn't even know how to do that, right? So as I started drawing, I had to see if I even had something, right? So the very first comic I sent to my mother, right? So, and I wanted her opinion. And so, you know how moms are. Oh, baby, you did good, right? So, in my mind, I'm like, oh, my mom likes it. It's good. So, I drew about 6, 7 comics. Now, take in mind, this is over the course of 3 months, I've been drawing every single day for hours for 3 months. So,
wow.
Once I got about 6 comics, I folded them up, put them in an envelope, and sent it to the newsletter. And he he wrote back to me. He said, "Hey, I like your comics. Some of them need a little work, but I like your comics. I like what you're saying, because each one was taken really from my life, being incarcerated, my daily being on lockdown, and just my daily life." And I sent it to him, and he said, and once he responded, he said, "I liked a few of them." He said to me, he writes back and says, "I can give you $25 for each comic that you draw."
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh. That blew my mind, right? I said, "You would give me $25 for," and take in mind, there were only single panel comics, and regular ink pen and pencil and typing paper. That's all I had. So he said, "I'll give you $25 for each comic that I choose to put in the issue." And so that was a confidence builder for me, complete confidence, right? And so what we ended up doing was, when I would send him my comics, he would actually send me back ideas on the wording.
Okay. He was like your editor.
Yeah. Your copy editor.
He was like, because now I'm sending him so many, because I have all these thoughts going through my mind of my daily, like, because I was thinking, do people really want to know what I'm thinking about, or what I'm going through, or what other people are going through? Because, you know, I'm also using the people that I've come in contact, my friends, right? and I would take their experiences and put them in the comics as well. To the point where he was like, "Oh, I like this," or like when we finally got off the lockdown, a buddy of mine that went to the board, and he got denied. And taking his experience was the first time I put a board. I created a comic strip based off of someone going to the board and get denied. And when I told him, I said, "Hey man, I'm gonna draw a cartoon about you going to the board and getting denied." And he was just like, "Okay." So when he finally saw it, when he actually got published, and I was like, "Hey man, this was inspired by you," you know, it gave him a sense of, I don't know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was kind of proud, like,
Yeah.
you know, like I said, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he like just shook my hand, was like, "Man, thanks," you know,
But
and that was like the very first board comic that I put, because I had never been to the board, so you know, I can't, you know, because didn't have that experience of actually going to the board. I didn't have I can only go by what I know it felt like to be denied. But when
right.
I spoke with him, now I'm able to put it into a comic, you know.
I think there's a lot of value to giving voice to people who feel like they haven't had one for so long.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually probably did give him some pride to be able to have, some sort of presence, that his story was also being told through you. So that actually is a very amazing story of the effect that you had on that one person. What was the reaction from other prisoners? Were you able to actually get feedback from the other prisoners themselves who were able to read your comic?
Yeah, well, it's funny because at first I didn't tell a lot of people that I was drawing, because, you know, sometimes in prison, whether it's other inmates or even guards, right? If they think you are getting, you know, I don't want to say power, but if you are to be seen as like either riling people up
Right.
or, um, you know, trying to revolutionize people, you know, it's a real tricky dynamic in
Sure.
prison. So I didn't want to paint a target on myself.
You didn't
So
want
I
to
kind of
upset
kept,
the power balance that was going
yeah.
on.
So I didn't want to do that either. So I didn't tell people. Only a certain few knew that it was actually me, because
Oh.
people would get the newsletter, and I would be walking around, and I could hear, I would be, oh, somebody, I could be sitting next to somebody, and they're reading the newsletter, and they're laughing at my comic,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't tell them that it was me,
Uh-huh.
right? So I got a chance to be secretly watching people and hearing what they're saying about the comics, and everybody liked it,
Oh, that's
because
awesome.
Yeah.
because it was authentic.
Right.
You know, even though they didn't know it was me, they knew from the style that I wrote it, they knew a person had to have experienced it. Even though it's only one panel and only a few words. So, and that was the thing, trying to get the point across and the message across in one panel and and two sentences.
Yeah, as succinctly as possible. And I think that speaks a lot to how you were able to capture authenticity. How did you navigate the balance between, being authentic in storytelling and the artistic expression within your comics? How did you balance creativity and truth? I mean, you told us a little bit about, like, talking with your friend, and I think that was an incredible show of sympathy as well, because you hadn't been to the board. But, like adapting other stories like that.
Well, because I was actually living it, it was easy, right? Um, it was easy to keep it authentic because I'm living it. I didn't have to fabricate. There's nothing to be fabricated,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going by off my actual experiences or people that's close to me. When they would go, like I said, when they would go to the board, they would share because I knew at some point in time, my time was going to be up to go to the board. So that was my opportunity as well, is to pick their brain on what's the feeling like.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need? What is there to expect? Because now through my comics, other people like myself that haven't went to the board but will be going, now they get a chance to see it for themselves
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I kind of make it comical, but I also make it serious.
Like a learning comic.
Yes, and that's what it was. It was an educational comic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to sound preachy,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to convey the message.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know, and the board is serious. It's your freedom or go back to your cell.
Mm-hmm.
That's your options, right?
Yeah, and I'm
So,
so sorry to cut in, but I realize that you've been saying the board the entire time, and I mean we know, what is, but can you tell to our listeners slash watchers what exactly the board is?
oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the board is the board of prison terms.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are a lifer, you have to go in front of the board, which is the commissioner and the deputy commissioner
Mm-hmm.
and the district attorney. So you all sit in a room and they pretty much go over what you've done in the prison system. What have you done with your time? Have you just sat around and did nothing? Watched TV and exercise all day? Have you did any self-help? What kind of self-improvement have you done? And the biggest question is what I've heard from even counselors is, do they feel safe living next door to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like when a counselor once told me that, another light bulb went off in my head. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That that's a valid question. That really is a valid question. Do I feel safe living next door to me? Right? So when you go to the board, that is kind of the sentiment. They want to know and make sure that the community is safe by letting you come back out into society.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So me pushing that in my comics was a way to keep it authentic and then keep it, you know, like I said, not too preachy,
Mm-hmm.
but letting other people know that this is what you have to do if you want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
That's really amazing. Thank you for sharing that. We've read your book, and we have to really say it has a very unique voice. How have people who have never experienced the justice system react to your work?
Oh, it varies, right?
Mm-hmm.
To I even get from people after they read it, I would have never known you was in prison that long,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's always a shocker for me. I mean, not a shocker because I put the time in and I put the effort in,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it still always amazes me when people read them and they just, hey, I didn't know, I didn't. You don't act like a person that's been in prison 24 years. Right? They did 24 years in prison,
Mm-hmm.
so it varies to all to like congratulations to you know loving just the way my voice is on that page on those pages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I haven't never had any negative um, feedback. Have got never gotten any negative feedback. It's
Mm-hmm.
always been positive. So that makes me feel good that I put out something of value because that book is those are my actual journal entries.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to journal every day. So all I did was take my journal entries and put a picture to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I think that that's very valuable to be able to get feedback from people who have never had that kind of experience. It's very valuable for the community of people who have been involved in the justice system, because I think that society puts upon so many misconceptions of people who are involved in the justice system. And a lot of times, because people who have never been involved don't have that experience, I bet you that they probably know more people than what they realize that
Yeah.
have that experience. And so I think that you putting a voice and a face and, a story to the nameless many that are involved is very, very uh, it's important. I worked with girls involved in the juvenile justice system, and unfortunately, some of them went into the adult justice system for many years, and combating those stereotypes. And if they had certain tattoos or whatever, visually they appeared one way, but they were trying so hard to change. And
Yeah.
sometimes people don't allow for that change, and they
Yeah.
don't allow to actually get to know a person because they have those misconceptions already. So I think what you did with your comic is so valuable to that community and to society as a whole. So definitely thank you so much. And what I also appreciated, it's a comic with just you in it. We never see any other character, but we
Yeah.
meet other characters. I know so much about your parents from reading this comic and their story that comes out in your panels is so touching. And I mean, you have mentioned a couple of times it's just one panel, and I have to get across so much in just one panel, but I hope you know that you were so successful in it, like
You
reading
really were.
through it all, and reading your mom's and your dad's responses to you and all that. It's a whole picture, because I think also a lot of people don't realize how much the justice system affects those people who are not
Yeah.
inside.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and we also get to meet these guards that come in and trash your living situation. So we never see them, but we get a
Yeah.
total feel about what kind of people they are and what they're trying to convey with their actions. So that was really cool too.
Yeah. So thank you. Like I said, those are actual events, that was happening. Um, and also the other part is I was always trying to be careful of not to seem like I'm glorifying prison.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mhm.
It's always all my comments are always to like be informative, maybe even make you chuckle a little bit, right? Because
Mhm.
you're like, did they do that? You know, but never in no way to glorify it, because it's not a place to be glorified,
Mhm.
right?
And I think
Especially when there's younger people that will read my comics. I
Mm-hmm.
want them to know the seriousness of your actions.
Mhm. And I think you captured that very well in the very like simplistic style that was used, that was still really well done. The entire book is truly a masterclass in storytelling. You were able to convey so much with like not very many details, but still I was Sarah had talked about the book, and I was just like, I wonder how it looks, because we have read other comics that have been done by other people who have been in the justice system, and styles vary. So I was very surprised, but I was also very like I was just like, this is incredibly well done. And then all the
Thank you.
information that you've done, that you've given us, I'm just like, okay, he had time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted
But
to.
thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
Also wanted to touch on, I know you have this book physically, and we could read it all the way through, but there are some panels that you introduced into the newsletter. Did you keep those? Were you able to keep any of those with you? They were a little bit slightly different, the ones that you put in the newsletter. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. So I kept every time that I had a comic in an issue, I kept the issue.
Mhm.
So I have all those issues.
Oh, wow.
That is incredible.
And yeah, I have them all. I have them all. And my mom, she kept them all because once um, my mom even became a member of the newsletter,
Oh,
so that
So she could get some.
she could get one every issue that came out. She would get one mailed to the house as well.
That's a proud mama for you.
Oh, it, it, and it's funny because when I was still inside, and because as you start drawing more and more and more, you progress, right? You
Mhm.
get better and you get better. So I asked my mother. I said, "Why did you tell me that that was good?" Because I looked at my first issue and it was terrible. It was terrible. The head was too big. The body was too little. But she was like, "I wanted to encourage you, and I wanted you to keep moving forward."
She was
You
gassing
know,
you
'cause
up.
yeah, and that's what she was doing, right? Because she was like, "Oh, she." I'll call her, and I'm like, "How you like it?" She's like, "Oh, it's good." I'm like, and like I said, I go back and I looked at it, and I was like, "Boy, that was terrible. What was I thinking?" But and then that's what she told me. She said, I was encouraging you. I wanted you to keep going to see where you can go with it." So, I give my mom and my father like the ultimate props for that because, you know, my mom has always been my number one supporter, my mom and my dad,
Yeah.
you know. So, you know,
So your comic obviously has been very impactful to a lot of different people, but interestingly, a college professor somehow got a hold of your comic and actually made it a class project and part of the curriculum. So can you tell us a little bit about what happened there? How did they get your comic? Did you guys have communication? Were you involved? And how did the students react to it?
okay, so one day, while I was in my cell, I had got a letter from a college professor, and and she was like, "Hey, I like your work," and it was a social studies class.
Mhm.
So what happened? They saw my cartoons in various newsletters because once I got the bug of drawing, whenever I would send my cartoons to every newsletter that was dealing with the justice system um, in it, even if I wasn't getting paid for it,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
because some of them, most of them were nonprofit,
Mhm.
didn't have a budget at all, just trying to push awareness of the
Yeah.
justice system. So if I found one that was, I would go through this just little newsletters, and if I saw one that I liked their message and I liked what they were trying to push out, I would just send them a bunch of comics.
Mhm.
I just send them, and then they would respond and say, "Okay, we don't have any money, but we can send you an issue every time we publish one." I'm like, "That's fine,
Mhm.
right?" So that's what I was doing. It didn't matter if they was in this country or not. I was sending stuff overseas.
Oh,
wow.
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 I was sending the stuff to overseas, and the college professor out here, like I said, it was a social studies class, small college, and uh, the professor was like, we want to talk about your comments in class. And so they did. They took a few of my cartoons and they talked about it and discussed it amongst themselves in their class. And then what they did was after that, the students that read my comics, they all wrote me
Mm.
and told me what they thought about my comics.
Hmm.
Um, I was also in a comic gallery. It was a gallery in New York where they had a whole display. So what happened was, and this was like years ago. I don't even know if it can be found. It was an art gallery, but what they did was they took one of the artists took a jail cell and made like a jail cell
Mm-hmm.
and took my comics and a bunch of other comics and put those along the walls of this made up jail
Oh,
cell
wow.
Uh-huh.
and made that the exhibit. So you would have to go into the cell and read the comics on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 2015, 2013, somewhere
Oh.
around there.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's actually really cool. Visually impactful. You're
yeah,
in this small little room and physically feel the same kind of feeling that you would have of the person of the art who you are experiencing.
yeah,
That's actually really cool. It gives me goosebumps actually to think
Yes, me
about
too.
it.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
that. I was like,
All I can
that
think
must
was
have been
like,
like moving.
yeah,
yeah.
whoever
So when
whoever did
they
that, A1.
no, yeah, it was in an art gallery. Like I
Mhm.
said, it was in New York around 2015 because obviously I couldn't go, and they sent me a picture of the the gallery display
Ooh.
of the like the sale, and you can see the different comics on the walls inside of this little in this little jail cell.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I've been in a lot of different newsletters all across the world, where people, like I said, have seen my cartoons online. Like I said, one of the biggest or my first experience of being online was with the Real Cost of Prisons.org. And I believe that's where you saw my first comics at.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So right there is where, same thing. The lady was um, um, doing her awareness about the prison system, but on the East Coast. But her reach was worldwide, and that's how I was getting um, to get my comics in other countries because once they would see it online, they would write me directly
Mm.
and say, "Oh,
Oh.
I'm in Germany, and I have a brother. Like I had met a writer that was in Germany, whose brother was actually in prison. She saw my cartoons and wrote to me about those comics that she saw, and she asked if she could put those comics in her author her booklet that she was putting together.
Oh, very
Wow.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how I was able to get overseas and get in different newsletters over there as well.
That's cool. So, uh, we have also heard that you just mentioned that you have other comics besides Calicarceration. Can you tell us a little bit about those comics?
Okay, so the comic book, like I was saying when I first learned that there were black cartoon characters or comic book characters, um, me and my me and my buddies inside, we we put together a comic book called Warrior Society, where and it's funny how the comic book itself was how they met was in a it was a world, a whole planet that was a prison,
Oh,
Mm.
and
Okay.
so we ended up meeting on this whole planet and realizing, not really knowing who we are as people, and as we would journey through this planet, trying to get off this planet, which the whole planet is a prison.
Mm-hmm.
We just because it's like the whole planet is a prison, but it's also like how can I put it? Um, daily routines.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole planet is just a prison, though, right?
Right.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and so the objective was to uh, get off that planet.
Mm-hmm.
But along the way is when we learn about who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of us had different like mental gifts, spiritual gifts. Others was our gift of communication as far as bringing people together to work together. So those were our gifts. You know, each of us had our own gifts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
And what was the process of you and this co-creator making that comic?
so we were just boy, going back to that, it was funny because we all got separated. Okay, we wanted to continue to write the comic, but because we were in 3, 4 different prisons, how we would have to write the comic is I would write my thoughts and stuff, and then I would mail it to my mom. My mom would in turn mail it to them. They would respond, send it back to me. Then we would have to send it to the person who was actually drawing it. So we would have to,
Wow.
Very
and
long
so
return time.
oh, and you know, it just got to be too much
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because we're talking. It would take almost a month to get one picture drawn
Mm-hmm.
because it was
Wow.
only we were 2 writers,
Mm-hmm.
you know, me and my co-writer, and then the person who was drawing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we would have to communicate because you couldn't write prison inmate to inmate.
Oh,
Oh.
Oh, okay.
see, I didn't even
Yeah,
know
you
that.
couldn't write.
Mm.
So in California, you can't write prison inmate to inmate in a different prison without permission.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
And for any reason, they can be like, "Oh no, we're not giving you permission."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that became the challenge. So that's how you have to. I would have to write the letter to my mom. She has to take it out of the envelope, put his name on it, send it to him, let him figure out what he wanted, any changes in the script. He'll
Mm-hmm.
then, after he gets it, he make his changes. Then my mom have to take that letter and send it to the person that's drawing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Then he have to draw it, send it back to me. Well, he would send it to my mom, and then she would send it to me and him. So
Mm-hmm.
my mom is my mom was my biggest assistant as well, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so, but the process it just became too much to
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
keep it going. But in that time, we did it for about a year, and we got all the way
Still.
up to um, we completed a full value. I mean,
Oh,
a
wow.
full issue. We
Mm-hmm.
completed an issue and a half. Um, and every time my mom would go and get copies made after it was drawn, at that time she was taking it to Kinko's to get the copies.
Yeah.
So when she would take it into Kinko's, there was always somebody looking over her shoulder, like, "Hey, what is that?" And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "Oh, this is a comic book my son is creating."
Mm-hmm.
And you know, people would always give it, be like interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I have enough issues. I have a poster. The artist he made a poster for us. He made the
Mm-hmm.
front cover of the first issue, and so it's enough to put out of the issue, but I haven't done it yet. Um,
Is it available anywhere besides the few printed copies that you still have?
I mean, if I would say if there was a real interest in it, I would definitely I wanna produce it. Just the one issue that I have
Yeah.
because it was it's it's unique. It's nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Nothing.
let it be known that on this episode of Las Platicas that there is interest.
Yes,
Okay.
there's many people interested. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's it's funny. I'm going back in my mind, and it just has me like remembering as bad as those times were on them level 4 prisons. We still had time to create,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right? Create something like lasting, powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, I think back on, like I said, I spent 24 years in prison. All of it wasn't all bad. It was mostly bad, but there were like those livable moments, those bright
Mhm.
moments,
Mm-hmm.
those genuine, valuable moments that I'll never forget. And drawing those comics, that's one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any plans or thoughts in that creative mind of yours of any other projects that you'd like to present in comic form in the future?
Well, I've reached out. Well, I still communicate with some of my buddies inside,
Mhm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've encouraged one because I told him about Comic Con, and he was like, man, that's great. He was so excited about it, and I encouraged him to start back drawing. I said
Yeah.
because he's still inside.
Mhm.
So have started encouraging him to start drawing. Um, because like I said, he was my co-creator with that because he could draw and he could write. See,
Mm-hmm.
at that time, I could only write.
Right.
I could only think of stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I used to always ask him, "Can we do that in a comic book?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, it's your creativity. You can do what you want to do.
You can do whatever you want.
You can do whatever you want to do." He was like, He would say, "Stop asking me. Just write it."
For any creative, that's the best advice you can give. Just do it. Just create it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, we look forward to that upcoming project too. Let him know that we said there's interest.
Yeah,
Okay, I will.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mentioned that, like, I think when we talked about this when we were at Comic Con, um, getting a collective of artists that is in prison
Mhm.
that don't have the voice. Um, so I, when I encouraged him to draw, I actually told him also to find other artists that has that desire to want to create something. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
you know that's what I've been working on as well. Well, what I have him working on, um, and sometimes everybody, inside they don't like to get their hopes up,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So you don't
Mm.
get let down. So
Mm-hmm.
Has the
you know,
communication process sped up any now that it's 2025, or is it still take a month to get something done?
well, it's still snail mail, but
Okay.
now in the
Snail
state of
mail.
California, they gave everybody tablets.
Right.
They
Oh.
got tablets now inside,
Mm-hmm.
so they can email. But the process, I don't know if it allows them to take pictures.
Mm.
So
Oh,
in a
okay.
sense, it is still snail mail.
Right.
Um, it, that's the only way you can still get the actual work out is
Right.
by
Right.
mailing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So in
What
that sense,
and
it hasn't sped up.
And I had another question. I know the like you're saying, like you can't take pictures and obviously they don't have on the tablets the programming to draw on the tablet. But what is the process about actual like paper and pens and paints? How are you familiar with what like can they be donated to these inmates?
Yeah. So like when we were doing it back then, um, you can order stuff from like sometimes prisons have um, they call it like the arts and crafts. where you can order paints and pencils and stuff like that, or you can order them from like the package vendors because they used to let your family make your own box and
Mhm.
mail it in to
Mm-hmm.
you, but now they've done away with that. So now it's all you have to go to an approved vendor to purchase stuff.
Oh wow.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
I
but
didn't know they got
even
rid of that.
yeah, they did. They got rid of that. So now everything is by a store. So they got these approved vendors. You and how it works is they send you a list of everything that they sell, and then you have to fill it out and send it to your family, and then they'll directly mail it to this particular store
Mm.
or vendor, and then
Mhm.
they'll send it to them.
Got it.
So as far as donating paper and pencils and stuff, no, I don't. Not that I know of, unless something has changed since then. What we used to just
Mm-hmm.
do is draw on regular typing paper. We would have to
Mhm.
purchase typing paper and pencils and ink pens, regular ink, big ink pens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And erasers, a lot of erasers, because what I used to have to do, I would draw the cartoon in pencil first,
Mhm.
and then trace it with the ink pen, and then use the eraser and get all the pencil marks off. And hopefully, I didn't make a lot of mistakes because now when because I have to mail that same paper off to whichever newsletter that's going to get it, and hopefully it doesn't, when they go to copy it, it's clear enough, and you don't see all my eraser marks mistakes.
Right. Right.
Right. Are there any, or were there any outside organizations that would come in and like do art mentoring or teaching, or people who were interested in that kind of thing? Did you have access, or do the prisoners, if you know, have access to that kind of thing now?
I don't know if they have access to it now. I only thing I remember they used to have like writing classes. So they
Okay.
did at one time. Every now and then, you would have a volunteer author or something that would come in and teach a writing class to teach you how to write like screenplays or movie scripts.
Mm-hmm.
But it was far in between, and then the class would get filled up really quick, and
Yeah.
then
Mm.
they'll be gone. So, but that would be a great idea to hold a a forum of volunteers from outside to go in
Mm-hmm.
and run an art class. That would be a great idea because let me
Yeah.
tell you, there's so many artists in prison that I
Yeah.
mean, I can tell you some phenomenal guys that I've seen that can take a regular picture, a photograph picture, and make
Mm-hmm.
their picture look better than the photo and
Yeah, I
add
bet.
stuff to it that's not even in the that's not even in the picture. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I just go, man, you're like the greatest artist ever. But then he would look at my comics and say, man, I can't even draw like that, you know, because it's I guess us as artists, we see things that other people do, and then sometimes we forget our own value until
Yes.
we like actually
Mm-hmm.
look at it again from somebody else's perspective, and then you go, oh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
okay, because that's what I had to do over the years, until somebody say, hey, they would see a comic, because then once people start realizing that it was me doing the drawing, now they know it's me because they would see my name down at the bottom. And they're like, hey, man, you drew that. And so, and so then it would be like, man, I like the way you put that together, and how long did it take you to do that? And, so now people are now really intrigued because now even they can say, I know the person who drew that.
Mm-hmm.
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 And then,
And it makes it seem accessible to them. It's like, I
yeah,
know Marcus. He is experiencing the same things I'm experiencing. We have similar experiences, and we're in the same situation. If he can do it, I can do it.
yeah, yeah. And that's why I said it's always about education and
Mm-hmm.
information, to make them think, to make everybody think, you know. So I had a series of cartoons that I started calling it "How do you know when you've been in prison too long?" Right now I
That
don't know.
sounds so cool.
Now I don't know if you've seen any of those online, but I had started putting those in the newsletters, and
Mm-hmm.
people they started really to like that one because then people
Uh-huh.
would come up to me while I was in there and be like, "Hey, how do you know if you've been in prison too long?" And they would give me different little scenarios to try to draw to think of, okay, how can I make this? Because the very first one that I did was, how do you know when you've been in prison too long? When you use your ID card to slice an apple in half. So
Whoa.
now, I actually saw that. That's what made me write the comic. The comic. That's
Mm-hmm.
what made me draw it. I watched the guy
Mm-hmm.
get the apple out of his lunch. We're sitting outside, and he take his ID card, which was a brand new card, so it was really sharp. Not sharp, sharp, but had enough little edge
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
Stiff.
He
Yeah.
took he took the apple and sliced the apple in half and gave it to one half to somebody, and he ate the other half. And I said, I got to make a
Whoa.
cartoon about that. And that's how I
Yeah.
started. How do you know when you've been in prison too long? When you use an ID card to cut an apple in half.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
That's incredible. So we have a segment on our podcast called On My Radar. Uh, and basically we just do it to highlight like things that we're interested, stuff that we're reading, watching, but just like what we're currently into. Can you tell us what's on your radar?
Well, what's on my radar currently is I'm a certified peer support specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So, what that means is when people come out of treatment or come out of jail or prison, or even experience homelessness. Now, even though I've never been homeless, being in prison is kind of being like homeless,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so it's the same feeling. And so I'm a peer support specialist. So that's what I do right now. I took the certification with the state of California. So I'm certified peer support specialist. So what I do
Mm-hmm.
is when guys come to my sober living house, that's where the peer support comes in at, whether it's helping them get a job, because I do janitorial work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's helping them manage their money with some financial literacy, because a lot of people don't know how to really manage their money. So
Yep.
um, it's about budgeting, right? Don't spend more than you're bringing in, right? Ultimately, uh,
It sounds so easy.
But my
but it's
credit
hard.
cards.
Yeah, it's hard,
Yeah.
right?
I learned
So
that hard
yeah,
lesson, that's for sure.
yeah. Well, you know what, you in debt with all these credit cards. So so that's what's on my radar is I'm actually looking to open up another house. Um,
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
yeah. So one of the things that I do, which is hard, opening up another house, but it's not hard. But for one, you have to find somebody that's willing to rent their house out to
Mm-hmm.
an
Mm-hmm.
organization for that cause. Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people that have property, first thing they think is, oh, I don't want to rent my house out to drug addicts Well,
Right.
one thing you can guarantee, that will be the only house on the block that nobody is doing drugs.
Yes.
Right? Right? It's a sober living house. You can
Right.
guarantee
Yeah.
you can guarantee nobody in that house is drinking or doing drugs. You can't say that about the neighbor, but you
That's
can
true.
definitely say it about that house.
Mhm.
Marcus, real
So
fast before we move on to the next question, I want to ask you, do
okay.
you ever share your comics with your peer specialist work?
Yes, I do. Even in my sober living house.
Okay.
Mhm.
There's a copy of my book in both because I have two sober living houses. There's a copy in both houses,
Mhm.
you know. And what that
Nice.
does is
Mhm.
it also breaks the ice between them and me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
So they can understand. Look, I know, I know what you're going through. I can relate to
Mhm.
what you're going through. So make better choices. Then, because it's like if you have a therapist, and I've seen a therapist before, right? And the lady was a good therapist. She was good, but there was kind of a disconnect
Mm-hmm.
because
Mhm.
if you have, let's just say, a white lady, she really doesn't know what it's like to be a black man.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mhm.
your knowledge is limited or based off of book and not
Mhm.
actual have lived it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in a sense, there's a disconnect. So if you trying to reach someone who's been homeless and you've never even experienced any inkling of what it's like to be homeless, not even
Mm-hmm.
never missed a rent payment, you don't know what that feeling is like. So that
Right.
person is going
Mhm.
to disconnect with you because he's first thing he's going to say is, "You don't know where I've been.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know.
Mhm.
You can't relate to this. So how can you help me?" So that's where being a peer support specialist comes into play to really
Mm-hmm.
help. Because I mean, it's like our society, we spend a lot of money on trying to get people off the street, but then that's as far as it goes.
Right.
There's trauma. There's a lot of trauma there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not putting any money to help the trauma, you're just putting a band-aid on something because you can put a person that's been homeless for years and give him a place. He's going to lose that place in a matter of months because
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to help with the harm reduction. There's nothing to help with it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
I
what's
often
frustrating.
tell I often tell people that you can do as much, only so much with prison reform inside the prison, but unless you focus equally on reentry, you're going to see a high rate of recidivism
Yeah.
because those people are returning to the exact same environment, the exact same family, the exact same friend group that they left, that got them in there probably. And if they are experiencing homelessness again, or joblessness again, or mental health crises again, and they don't have the skills or the tools to be able to deal with those things differently, they very well may make those same poor choices all over again. And
Yeah.
so what you're doing is so, so important. And I am just so happy to hear of all the work that you're doing, because you are helping to break that cycle for those people. And I appreciate that so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, so we also have a segment on our podcast called Juntos y Fuertes, and that highlights noteworthy endeavors by members of marginalized groups that we think deserve support. So, are there any projects, other nonprofits, or any programs that you would like to plug or educate our listeners on that you think are really important?
Well, just going back to what I think is important is the reentry, um, and just the housing part of it and the education part of it. Um, there's none that I can say specifically because I work with a lot of different organizations. Um,
Mm.
that I would, my only thing would be just the housing part of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm always looking for a new location to open up because there's
Mhm.
so many people that need not only treatment, but they also need housing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
and that's the biggest thing. Like I work closely with an organization called Share out of Culver City. They are
Mhm.
like a hub for helping people get off the streets. And then I work closely with the Sober Living Network, which is the organization that helps in the housing part of it as well as the sober living aspect of it. So those are the two organizations that I work closely with on a regular basis. And then I have many case managers from different other organizations that I work with personally, um,
Mm-hmm.
that's also in the fight against homelessness.
That's awesome. Well, we had such a great conversation. I learned a lot. I loved hearing every bit of it and all the hard work you put into your work. Um, where can listeners follow your projects and your future projects? Any websites, any social media that you can share with our listeners so they could follow you and learn more about your any future projects?
Well,
That
so
comic you're
my
going to be making.
You know, I'm actually going. What I'm gonna do because of this conversation and because of being on here, I'm going to take a page or two out of that comic book and I'm gonna post it on Instagram. So my
Oh,
Nice.
awesome.
Instagram is
Yeah.
yeah. So my Instagram is Antone Cali Jones. That's that's my cartoon character. That's his name. That's what I named him. That's his name, Antone Cali Jones.
Okay, I'm
So
going to
that's
look right now.
yeah, that's my Instagram. So if you go on there, you'll actually see actual people who has purchased my T-shirts. Um, that has
What? There's a
purchased. I
t-shirt?
oh yeah, I print up my own shirts. Um,
Oh,
my,
nice.
I got a heat press. But I'm also on Teesprings, um, where I have my other shirts of where I sell my other shirts on Teespring. Now you can also look
You
at that
have a
link.
Calicarceration t-shirt. I want that.
Oh,
I love
yes, yes,
it.
yes. So those are actual people who purchase my T-shirts, um, and yeah. And then on Teespring, so if you go on Cali Carceration, you'll see. I mean, if you go on Anton Cali Jones, you'll see the link to where I sell my T-shirts online.
That is so awesome. That's really cool. I didn't know you had a t-shirt. Now I'm like excited as well.
Oh yeah, and the link to Teespring is actually on the Instagram,
Yep.
and Antone Cali Jones is ANTONECALIJONES. And we were
Awesome.
already following him, so it came right up when I looked.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I follow you guys as
Well,
well.
of course. Well, guys, it has been so amazing. I really enjoyed our Las Platicas today. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and telling us all about your comic and where the inspiration came from and all of that. That is such amazing information to kind of like get more of a bigger feel for the comic. They could also purchase your comic online, correct?
Yeah, well, directly through me. So you would just message me, um, and then
Okay.
I mail them to people where they need to go, and I sign them as well. Because I do
Awesome.
my own
Awesome.
printing.
Well,
I do it all myself.
Oh wow.
yeah.
One man show.
Yeah.
Yep, one man
That's
show.
that's incredible.
Well, for authenticity, I want to order one, but you have to send it to someone else first and then to me.
Well,
Look, and the way
it's
the
been
mail
a
is
real
going, it'll take you
pleasure.
20 days to get it.
Right.
Yes, so that brings us to the end of these last pláticas. Thank you so much for joining us. We have been your host. I'm Sarah.
I'm Kristen,
And I'm Jen.
I'm Marcus.
No worries.
and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Yes.